Tired of the noise and spin? Join the Middle Ground Mike Patreon for 7 days for free. And then it's just $1 a month afterwards. Real talk, real people right now. Sign up today, middlegroundmike.com. Click on the button. The vision is easy, but finding the middle, that's where the real work begins. Welcome to the Middle Ground Mike. I'm Joe, and today we're cutting through the noise to tackle this week's headlines with balanced perspective and talk. Every Monday, we take a step back from the chaos, the shouting, the extremes, and we look for the middle ground. Because truth, it almost is never found in the far left or the far right. It's always somewhere in between, and that's what we're going to do today. Before we jump in, don't forget, our Finding the Middle newsletter is free, lands in your inbox twice a month with deeper dives, behind the scenes notes, and stories we don't always have time for here. Sign up at themiddlegroundmike.com/newsletter. All right, let's kind of jump in and talk a little bit about politics in the week. Let's start where the noise is the loudest. Obviously, some of the 2028 chatter is, Project 2029 buzz, internal debates among Democrats about do they want to go more centrist or more left. That's a hot topic, right? Because AOC is very, very, very popular among the far left. It does appeal to some centrists in the American Democratic Party, but a lot of centrists, like pure centrists, no party affiliation / independents, they don't always view that the same way. They like her enthusiasm, they like some of her ideas, but they don't always agree with the policy, right? So where do the Democrats find the balance on that? They have a lot of rising stars. I think that ignoring John Fetterman is not a good thing. Well, some people call him a flip-flopper, this, that, the other thing. He represents a lot of middle of the road, middle ground, right? Americans that do tend to lean towards the Democratic Party. So engage him, find out how you can link the far left and that to make solutions that appeal to the average American. Because right now, the last election cycle, even the midterms, even though Democrats are taking control of the Senate, it's still reflected a shift towards the voters seeing the GOP as more of a workers' party, which hasn't been seen in a long time. So Democrats got a lot of work to do to fix that, the Democrats walking out in Texas, big party fractures, right? There's a lot of pressure for them to get back from obviously Republicans in Texas, but also some national Democrats are pushing to get back. I think we need to do more to get rid of gerrymandering. It's politicians shouldn't be able to change districts to make it so they want more seats or separated by this. No, it should just be based on regular demographics and not open to interpretation. Regular demographics, right? And it seems sometimes as if both parties are struggling with an identity, right? Maybe the real isn't conversation about who wins, but about what our leadership actually looks like. Like it's considered Ronald Reagan was a very good leader. But so was Bill Clinton, right? George Bush for a little bit more monotone, right? But Barack Obama had a way of just saying things that connected with people. Right now, our last two presidents, Donald Trump's a little bit more blunt. I do like that part. But, the leadership thing, depending how you view it, may not be there. Leadership is definitely where we struggle as a country right now. It just is. Like the confidence isn't there. It doesn't seem to round our leaders do a better job of working on building the American people's confidence. We're going to talk a little bit about domestic policy and kind of a little bit about society. The immigration / deportation situation, the humanitarian versus rights, right? Technically, if you're not a citizen, you're going to have a lot of rights, but I know a lot of people are starting to come out and say, hey, well, we want to go after the violent criminals, certain things like that, but also, should we be given a second chance to a lot of people that are here peacefully? I think that we should. Ronald Reagan did it, and it worked out very well for our country. Let's get these people on the payrolls. Let's do that. You don't have to do that for everybody. I think we should do that for a lot of peacefully working people. If you've got any kind of crime against you, well, you know what we got to do. Excuse me. It's not a good thing. There's people out there that die, right? Kids get separated. So, we got to kind of find a little bit more of a balance in here. A A lot of immigrants voted for Trump, the ones that are here legally, right? Because they kind of feel that way. Hey, I went through the process. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. They're really, I mean, there is a wrong, right, with certain aspects, but it's really a difficult question to decide. Like I said, my position is we find a balance and we push it towards, like, hey, if you're peaceful, maybe you get a second chance, depending on a lot of situations. I think majority of the time we should. But if you've committed crimes, any kind of that, you got a heavily association you can prove with anything like that. Adios, you're gone. And no, we shouldn't be paying to jail you, get you out of the country. It is not our thing. But what if we admitted both are true? A humanitarian framing versus the right security framing, right? Like how we're framing this debate. Borders matter. They're extremely important because you got to control what's going on in your land. But so does dignity. Ignoring one side guarantees failure. Like you have to have dignity while controlling your borders. Without that, you're going to fail every time. It's kind of like local government. Local governments have to respect their people a lot more than the federal government does. Not the federal government doesn't, right? But they got to be a lot more in tune with the needs and wants of their constituents. It's a whole lot harder to pass the buck off, and it's something to do, right? Like here in Michigan, where at the state government level, sometimes it's concerning is, we got companies here who produce a lot of profit that are public utilities, and they keep coming back and asking for more money, and the commission approves it. That I am vehemently against. I mean, if you're producing billions of dollars a year in profit, we should not be giving you money. I'm sorry, we should. I'm not saying like electric bills free. What I'm referring to is increasing rates, right? Grocery prices. I mean, it has kind of seemed stabilized, at least for me. I don't know about you guys. Maybe just and that's kind of where the big debates are landing, right? Gas prices have stabilized, grocery prices have stabilized, but now we're saying we're going to see a lot of upticks from down at us here at the local level from the tariffs. All right, we're going to take a quick pause. Quick pause. I'm sorry, quick pause. Delete that other part out. A quick pause. This podcast is more than me talking. It's a community. It's a movement. Subscribe free to the Middle Ground newsletter, or delete that part. This podcast is more than me talking. It's a community. It's a movement. Subscribe free to Finding the Middle newsletter for deeper dives and exclusive stories. www.themiddlegroundmike.com/newsletter. And if you want to help us grow, consider joining our Patreon for 7 days for free and only $1 a month after, with exclusive Q&A, exclusive behind the scenes, things that went on from interviews, maybe pre-conversations. Division is easy, but together we can build something better. All right, welcome back, everybody. Let's talk a little bit about, some media and some culture. We scroll, we share, but where are we at? Are we actually talking to each other, or are you just yelling past me? Like a lot of times in some of these sections, right, you can go, somebody makes a mistake on a post, people are just ripping them apart. I had one where I made a mistake about Rockefeller. I said, hey, whoops, my mistake. I think it was more of like, I didn't misspeak, right? I had the facts kind of wrong. Maybe I just misunderstood it when I was reading it. He didn't know as much about gasoline, just knew it was byproduct, right? And then he worked on finding use. He had a scientist do that. But people get mean, and they just yell, because even if you can go, hey, this is why this. I mean, like, you can go, for instance, in one of my videos on, I believe it was TikTok. Pretty sure it's TikTok, Facebook, one too. I get that they're like, oh, Hamas is bad, like no matter what, right? And I'm like, hey, I get it, right? But we got to find a way to put this end, because aid workers are getting killed. This, innocent children. And he was like, well, Hamas is bad. And it's like, nobody's denying terrorists are bad. Like, nobody's saying that this isn't good. Like, I'm struggling to find why this needs to be the point to prove. I get why he's saying that, right? Because he's going, hey, we got to get rid of Hamas no matter what. I get it. But there's innocent people dying there that have died through accident by, the Israeli Defense Force. All they're trying to do is give food, water to these children, these innocent people. We've got to do better. Anybody who's doing something like that has to do better. Like the people attacking, like the Israelis said, oh, hey, the Israeli government, sorry, not the people, the Israeli government said, oh, hey, we want to occupy all of Gaza and then we'll give it to Arab control. What? It's just what a cop out and trying to use as an excuse to invade someone's country. I know America doesn't have them talk, but man, that is a terrible excuse. Terrible reason. I mean, good grief. We got to do better than that. We do got, another episode coming up in the next couple of weeks. It's going to be based off of the company Crowds on Demand. I spoke to the CEO there. They're the largest, paid crowd company in the game. Definitely learned a lot about it and what goes on behind the scenes. He was a really, really cool guy, really knowledgeable. We had a great conversation. He's great, personable in the pre-interview. So, definitely be checking that one out, because if you guys really want to know what goes on behind the scenes, Donald Trump has talked about paid protesters, things like that. That is a real thing, right? But find out the reasons why, who funds it, things like that. How does all of it work? What goes on? What are the intricacies behind it? And he actually turned down a $20 million deal because he didn't like what it would have been. Because I think he said it could have been possibly violent or something of that nature. But man, he was a great guy, a really, really cool guy. I got to learn a lot about the industry. So look forward to that coming out in the next couple of weeks. It'll probably be out one of the first episodes of season 2, which starts in September. So definitely check it out. But the middle isn't boring. It's real life. The middle ground, what we're talking about here, some of these basic things, it's real life. Like we see protests in real life, right? We see conflicts based on politics in real life. We see the division among our neighbors where we can't even have a, hey, how you doing that knob, right? That like Midwesterners get. Those things are all vanishing because people have become so vile for something that they don't like. Even not like the respect for someone doing their own thing is gone. So, and we got to refuse to let algorithms define our conversations, right? Because a lot of these algorithms are based to be toxic. That's how they get clicks. It's how they generate things. You're like, what's going on, right? So we got to try to do better. I know I'm not going to be the person who's going to change the world or anything. No, I'm not claiming to, right? But hopefully we can get a conversation going to where we can get some of those people to the table. We can get them to maybe not be as toxic. Maybe want to listen to some of the people that maybe don't do things the same way as they do. It's sad that we even have to kind of talk about that, right? Let's talk a little bit about, some global conflicts. While we're here busy fighting at home over some crazy things rather than respecting everybody's right to exist, the world isn't slowing down. I mean, our social issues are very petty compared to everybody else's issues in a lot of things. Iran's still casting a huge shadow over the Israel-Gaza thing we were talking about a little bit ago. Ukraine's battlefield struggles. They're struggling right now, right? They're struggling, like because Russia keeps the drone strikes, right? It's just a lot because Russia's got a little bit of back end from some partners, and they're being a lot more aggressive, and Ukraine's just trying to defend their territory. I know we're supposedly going to be placing some more sanctions on Russia. And I know that this past Friday, Trump and Putin had a meeting that went really, really well. So, and I believe they said out of it that a ceasefire is not a starting point. It has to be a peace deal to end the war. Some people are saying that it's Trump kind of turning sideways. But I believe this week, Zelensky and some other European leaders are going to be meeting with Trump. So let's see how that goes. Hopefully we can start getting, and then, talking about the sanctions with Russia, yeah, they hurt Russia, but are they rippling back into the global markets? Commodities security, right? For oil, gas, and food. Like, who feels the pinch the hardest? Everyday people, right? So, like, where do we find the balance between getting Russia, but also hurting our own citizens? And instead of asking who's winning, maybe the better question is, how do these things shape ordinary lives far from the battlefield. How does this affect how you and I live? Because even though it doesn't directly affect us, like in our everyday waking up and go to work, it sometimes it affects our pocketbooks. It affects how we view things sometimes. So things that we've got to do a better job on. This week, take the extra 5 seconds, listen before reacting, ask questions before taking sides. And remember, our strength is never what divides us, it's what connects us. Don't forget to subscribe when you listen, join the newsletter, jump into Patreon, help us grow this movement. I'm Joe. This is Middle Ground Mike, and I'll see you next time. And please help boost our Spotify ranking. Let's get us up